A.J. Brown just called out the Philadelphia Eagles as he just followed another lackluster performance in Week 4 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we're going to break down what exactly this message was, what it might mean, and some comments from head coach Nick Sirianni and offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo and their thoughts on the matter at hand. And we're going to break down all that and more in today's edition of Eagles Digest. How's it going, folks? I'm your host, Jack Harley. So without further ado, let's just get right into what A.J. Brown said. So A.J. Brown posted on social media, I believe it was on Sunday. He said, if you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw, don't make a scene, as a suggestion that Brown does not want to play for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, of course, we've seen this behavior from many wide receivers in the past, such as George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs. They all have this tendency of posting their feelings online rather than kind of keeping it internal, keeping it in the locker room, just, maybe just venting to a teammate or offensive coordinator or a head coach. They really do like to put it on display in front of everybody, but, it gets people's attention, of course, especially opposing teams that may want an all-pro caliber receiver such as A.J. Brown. But we've seen this stuff from A.J. Brown before. If you remember from last season, he was reading the book on the sidelines. A lot of people took that into account, but of course, it didn't really mean anything as the Eagles did continue to win the Super Bowl that season. But, this is the thing that happens with wide receivers. One game, they might not get some targets. They're going to be vocal about it. But, there's no reason for it to be, a big deal. But, of course, A.J. Brown has had a pretty cold start to this season. He, of course, had a very, very, very good game against the Los Angeles Rams in Week 3, but from Week 2 and Week 1 and from Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he has not been putting up the numbers he usually has. He's averaging around 38 receiving yards a game, which is, obviously way below the standard of what he usually does. But let's get into what exactly Nick Sirianni said about this situation. He said that obviously AJ is very important to this football team. I know he wants to contribute and do the things that he's capable of doing. But yeah, he wants to contribute to these wins, and he's had a couple of games where he hasn't been able to, and for different reasons of why we haven't in these games. But I question nothing about his desire to play great football, his desire to be a good teammate, his desire to be here. So I totally agree with Sirianni here. I really do think that A.J. Brown does want to stay a Philadelphia Eagle. I think he wants to be here. He absolutely gives 110% of effort on a week-by-week basis. I think he knows he can be involved in the offense, but it's just not clicking this year, as you can see. Jalen Hurts ever since he's been an Eagle, he's just had this tendency to miss reads. He has a tendency to overthrow, mistime his throws. If you watch the game on Sunday against Tampa Bay, you could see that some of the throws that Hurts was throwing to him was mistimed, overthrown. They just were not good balls. But if you look at what Kevin Patullo said as well, Kevin Patullo said that he called it a great problem to have a lot of mouths to feed on the offense, that he believes everyone, including Brown, is on the same page when it comes to doing what's necessary to win. He was also quoted saying that AJ and I have a great relationship just throughout the years being here. We spent a lot of time together so far as communication and getting to him, and I have had no problem. I know where his heart is, where he lies. He wants to win. So he feels like he can do everything and anything to help us at all times. So as far as I'm concerned, him and I are in a good spot. And yeah, I'm sure they are. But, the play calling also has not been there for A.J. Brown. He ran 0 routes across the middle of the field on Sunday against Tampa. Most of the routes that he ran were curl routes or go routes. And for those of you that don't know, go route is when a wide receiver just runs in a straight line, usually for the result of a big yardage play, like 20 plus yards, or of course a touchdown. And a curl route is just when a wide receiver runs around 5 yards past the line of scrimmage and then turns around to receive just a quick little check down from the quarterback. But, that needs to change because A.J. Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the league that runs routes across the middle of the field. So you need to play to his strengths, which is, running routes like that. He can run any route, really. I mean, when you're a top 5 wide receiver, you're like a Swiss Army knife. You can run any route on the route tree. And of course, Kevin Patullo needs to incorporate those kinds of plays into the offense if he wants A.J. Brown to succeed. Now, A.J. Brown still is the most targeted wide receiver on this team. It makes me feel for DeVonta Smith a little bit because, you don't really see him complain or put up those cryptic messages on social media. And he's been asked in the past if he has any trouble not receiving any targets. A.J. Brown is getting all the attention in the offense. And I believe he was quoted saying, in games that A.J. Brown had a lot of yards and DeVonta Smith didn't have as many, maybe he had like 20 or 30 yards. He says that we won the game, that's all that matters. If I'm not involved in the offense, that's just football. That's the name of the game. Sometimes you get the ball and sometimes you don't. But, that's kind of the attitude that, really helps a locker room work together. And, there's no egos. And I'm saying that A.J. Brown has an ego of any sort. He's actually seems to be one of the most least egotistical players on this team or in the NFL as a whole. But it's just nice to have that mentality in the locker room. And as you can see from this graphic I just pulled up here, you can kind of have a look at where A.J. Brown has been targeted around the football field thus far this season. And he's got a few right down there just past the line of scrimmage, but, not really much more than that. He runs some corner routes and some post routes, and a few out routes as well, but he's not, again, being played to his strengths. So I think it's really important that going into this game against the Broncos this week, that him and Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts can kind of get on the same page and see what they can do to get to efficiently get A.J. Brown involved in the passing game. He needs to obviously work together with Jalen Hurts and Kevin Patullo to kind of express where he wants to be on the field, what kind of routes he wants to run, and how he thinks that he can effectively get open for Jalen Hurts. Because, the Denver Broncos, surprisingly this season, have actually not been the best in pass coverage, especially with the reigning Defensive Player of the Year in Pat Surtain. So that'll certainly be an interesting matchup to see because that Pat Surtain is obviously going to be covering A.J. Brown for most of the game. So that would obviously be awesome to see if A.J. Brown could really just kind of have another breakout game again, especially against one of the best corners in the game in Pat Surtain because, he broke out against the Rams, as I said before, in week 3, and had 127 yards. He had, I believe, 8 receptions. And the Rams are no slouch in the secondary as well. So, it will be really interesting and exciting to see him really have a game against the Denver Broncos. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit as well, there were some comments made from Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce about how, that the team is winning, right? So, there's obviously you want to be incorporated into the offense. You want to feel like you're contributing. But, it's also important to recognize that the team is 4-0. That matters. You're an undefeated team, and you're also beating teams that are no slouches either. You bet the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Los Angeles Rams, who are premier playoff teams in this league. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on this whole A.J. Brown situation. If you think if he's going to stay on the team, maybe he gets traded or something. I think that would be insane if he got traded. I think this whole thing is kind of getting blown out of proportion here. But, let me know what you guys think. Give us a score prediction for Sunday's game against the Denver Broncos. How do you think A.J. Brown's going to do? Do you think Jalen Hurts is going to get the ball to him? Do you think he's going to have a lot of passing yards? Because he certainly didn't last week against the Bucs, having no passes completed in the second half. Hopefully that is not the case against the Denver Broncos. Thanks, guys, a lot. Go Birds.